everyone and welcome to my March wrap up. Please ignore the sounds of planes going through because obviously it's now getting into spring, the sun's out, and obviously that means that planes have decided to fly over my house, which is very, very annoying. I can't really do much about it, so we're just going to have to ignore that. So in March I managed to get 22 points for TBR Assemble, which led to these stats, and I'm still not over this because quite frankly March was a month to say the least. A lot of things happened, a lot of it was stressful. I didn't have that much time to read because it was like my birthday, I got vaccinated, there was a whole lot of caring duties to do and a whole lot of other things, and I just ended up I didn't think I read that much. It turns out I did. Obviously though, it does help that quite a few library holds came in, and I'll go into that in a minute, but this is currently my stats, and 22 points for TBR Assemble is the most I've gotten so far, and I am so happy with that. As for what I've read, I'm not going to go in any sort of particular order here. I'm just going to go through in terms of my notes because that's just going to be the easiest way to do this. So the first thing I have to mention is Wakanda Forever by Nnedi Okorafor. Now I read this literally yesterday and it was not my favourite, I've got to admit. I really liked the idea of following the Dora because I really do like the Dora and I do want to know more about the Dora of the world of Black Panther. But this one just didn't really work for me. I enjoyed seeing Okoye and those characters, but unfortunately this did also focus on Nakia, who is a character I generally love in the films, but for me, with Nakia, it was a very sort of sexist idea that she was obsessed with T'Challa and just wanted T'Challa to love her, and she's sort of gone a bit evil and a little bit mad because she loved him so much and stuff like this, and it just felt a little bit sexist in its way. Like, I understand that this was not Nnedi's fault, this has been a story that's been ongoing for a long time in Black Panther comics, but I was just a bit like about the whole thing, I've got to admit. In saying that though, I did enjoy like the interactions the Dora had with people like Spider-Man and just with each other in general, and sort of reading a bit more about how you become a Dora and stuff like this, but the comic as a whole just didn't really work for me, so I only gave it 3 stars. And then my comic event was the Civil War event because House of M did not happen in WandaVision, so I did not read House of M. Instead, I read Civil War. So what I'm going to do is quickly mention the 2 that were rereads. This was The Road to Civil War and also Civil War. Now, these 2, they were good. There was a little bit of sexism and fatphobia and stuff like this in here, and that wasn't fun, to be honest, but it was alright, I guess. It was not my favourite, I've got to admit. It did not hold up as well as it did the first time round, but it was reasonable. And then I went on to The Death of Captain America, which was also a 3-star read because, as you can see, it is a chunker of a comic, and quite frankly it was too long. It was far too long, to be honest, and it was so confusing to read because this is obviously the death of Captain America. Steve Rogers is killed on the steps of the Capitol building after he has been arrested for his crimes in Civil War, and Sharon shoots him because she has been brainwashed, and it sort of goes from there. And it's just very confusing because at points you're following Sharon, who has been brainwashed, and she's trying to fight against it, which was interesting but very confusing. You've then got Bucky, who is hunting down Tony, or at least trying to hunt down Tony to kill him because he blames Tony for Captain America's death, which I get. But it was just really confusing, like the way it was told. It was sort of like jumping about sort of all over the place, and I was just a bit like, what? For like most of it, and I felt like this could have been cut down a hell of a lot and just told like the main story instead of going off on tangents. Like the fact that Captain America has a clone, like Steve Rogers has a clone, and it was like, what? I couldn't understand that one. And then it was like I understand that that is a character and that was a plot point like years ago, but it had no real place in this, and I was just a bit like, what? For like most of the comic, I will admit. And just basically it was just too long, it was just too confusing. I will admit I did like the exploration of Bucky as a character, but I think it could have been done better, and also I wanted to see more ramifications of what happened essentially, because I feel like we focused so much on Bucky and so much on Sharon. I would have liked to have seen some more ramifications in terms of everybody else, in terms of the fact that Captain America has just been killed live on TV. I feel like I know that's probably in like other bind-ups and stuff. I would have liked to have seen that. I have seen panels where obviously Tony is apologising to Steve, like Steve's body, and I would have liked to have seen that a bit more, but I don't know. It was alright, essentially. It was very much an alright comic, and I just don't think it was worth the length of it, quite frankly, so I only gave it 3 stars. I then went on to Falcon and the Winter Soldier Cut Off One Head by Derek Landy, and this was so much better. This was brilliant as a comic. I so enjoyed this one. It was filled with such fun banter. I loved like the artwork in here as well. It was just like, it was so Sam and Bucky and so like Derek Landy in its way, and it just worked so well. I love seeing them team up together to try and find Sam's missing friend. I love like the Hydra element of it. The only complaint I have with this comic is that it was too short. I genuinely think that this would have worked better as a huge, great big long run of comics, not just a one shot. I do feel like it could have worked so well with a big, well, maybe not an event, but at least having it to be like 2 or 3 like bind-ups long. I think that would have been really cool and would have allowed it to really flesh out everything that happened. But in saying that, I did still really enjoy this one and just thought it was absolutely hilarious and just pure Derek Landy and pure Sam and Bucky, which was exactly what I was looking for, and I gave it 4 stars. Turns out I actually have a bit of an order, and that is apparently I'm going through all the comics first, so apologies if you don't like comics, but the next one I read was Bucky Barnes' Man on the Wall, because this one is about Bucky and Daisy Johnson, aka Quake, going into space to try and stop threats coming to Earth, I think. And to be honest, I still don't know, because this was such a confusing comic, because nothing really was explained. There were like 2 Buckys, one of which was an old man. For some reason, Crossbones was in space, and he doesn't really go into space either, trying to kill Bucky. There was multiple timelines, multiple like universes, and talk of it, and I was just very confused. And I just spent the entire time with a sort of giant question mark over my head going, what the hell is going on? And it just confused me. It just confused me, flat out confused me. I had no idea what was going on for like 90% of this comic. Literally, I had no idea what was going on. So that was fun. I will say the artwork is good, and I did like seeing Daisy in this comic and her and Bucky's interactions, but the rest of it I was just a bit like, what? And also, I just generally don't think Bucky works as a character in space. Bucky is very much a down to earth, on the ground kind of guy. Like, as the Winter Soldier and as Bucky, I do not think he works as a character in space, to be honest. He works so much better, for me personally, on the ground. Daisy, yes, Daisy Johnson definitely works in space, but Bucky really doesn't, so it was just very confusing to have him in space, to be honest. So in the end, I only gave this one 3 stars as well. But then the final Marvel comic I read before I go into the books and the manga was Winter Soldier Second Chances, and this one turned it around again, just like Falcon and the Winter Soldier did. This one worked really well. I really enjoyed seeing Bucky interact with RJ. I loved RJ's story. I love this idea of Bucky trying to make amends and help people like him and stuff like this. I found all of this really interesting and really fun, so I gave this one 4 stars. And now finally onto the books. First one I have to mention is Sanctuary. Now this one was the Avengers Reading Challenge book, and I was so nervous going into this book because I'd seen on the Avengers Reading Challenge group chat Discord thing that everyone hated it. Everyone really hated it, but for me personally, I didn't mind it. It was sort of like a cheesy alien-esque story, sci-fi thing. It was really cheesy, really quite generic and tropey, but I didn't mind it too much, to be honest. It was alright. I definitely think this author has got potential. I know this was her debut novel and it was good in that sense, but I do think it was just slightly too tropey for me, and it was sort of like, oh, I know exactly what's coming here. I guess the plot twist with what the aliens wanted within like their first couple of appearances, literally it was like 100 pages in and I went, oh right, yeah, I know exactly what's going to happen here, and I turned out to be right. Every single chapter ended on a cliffhanger. It was non-stop action. I sped through it really quickly, so I enjoyed it, but I don't think I'm going to continue the series just because it was just that tad bit too tropey for me, and it was fun, but I'm not invested, so I only gave this one as well 3 stars. But then onto a book I really enjoyed, and that was Not Even Bones. Now this one was described as This Savage Song by V.E. Schwab meets Dexter, and oh my god were they right. I mean, This Savage Song is a little bit iffy, but I get why they've said that, but the Dexter vibes are definitely there, because this book is all about Nita, whose mother hunts monsters, kills the monsters, brings the monsters back to her, and then Nita dissects them so they can then sell these bodies on the black market. And it just worked for me so well. It was quite gory, I've got to admit, but I don't mind the gore. I am here for gore quite a lot of the time. I mean, I grew up watching Blade and stuff like this, so gore doesn't really bother me. I really enjoyed, like, the characters and how morally grey they were. All of them were morally grey in so many ways. I really enjoyed that. I loved, like, all of the elements in this one. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I really enjoyed, like, the plot twists of it as well, and the writing style. And as soon as I get paid, I am going to be buying the next 2 in this series, because I loved this. It was absolutely brilliant, and it's what I would call Wednesday Addams kind of book, essentially. This is definitely a Wednesday Addams kind of book, and I really enjoyed it. It won't be for everyone, I've got to admit, but it was definitely for me. It worked so well. I then went on to Truthwitch. Now, this one was for the Witchlands along, and I was nervous going into this one again because this is a really hyped series, and I have problems with hyped series. I generally end up not liking them, and this one I enjoyed, but I have a lot of problems with. And the main problem for me is that it goes far too quickly. This book literally sped along, which I usually quite enjoy. I do not like slow books whatsoever. I'm much here for action, fighting, plot. But this one was too much plot and not enough sort of processing time, because I felt like with this book there was no time to process anything. It was just speeding along with absolutely no time to sit down and go, wait a minute, what just happened? And it was just like, the 2 of them got split up, then one of them found out something, another one found out something else about it, like their futures and all the rest of it. They got run out of villages, they got kidnapped, then they ended up on a boat, then the boat ended up being attacked, and it was just sort of like all over the place for me. I would have liked just a few more moments throughout this book where the characters process what's just gone on and discuss what's just gone on, so then me as a reader could have found out what was going on and just sort of breathe for a minute and just figure out what's happened and process it all, because it just felt like it was speeding along far too quickly for me to actually catch up with what's been going on the whole way through. I also would have liked a bit more world building, because there were so many witches, and trying to figure out exactly what witch was what was very confusing. I also would have liked to just know more about this world, because we know about the warring countries and this peace treaty and all the rest of it, but we didn't get a full explanation as to who these countries were, what the peace treaty was, what came to like have the peace treaty and stuff like this. I would have liked just a bit more world building. It felt like I was just sort of plonked into this world and just expected to sort of catch up and carry along with it, and I just would have liked a little bit more world building in places so I could have understood this world and everything more, I guess. Also, I have a problem with just the idea of a truth witch, because truth witches can still lie. They can detect lies, but then they can lie to whoever's employing them. So why the hell do the royalty want to kidnap these people and use them, because those people can still lie? I'd personally want a blood witch more, because a blood witch has got so much more power. Do you know what I mean? Like, blood witches have a hell of a lot more power. They're a hell of a lot more rare. So I'd be gunning for the blood witch, not the truth witch. And I just didn't understand why truth witches were so important. I would have liked just, again, more explanation, to be honest. This book just needed more explanation for me personally, and just some time to sit down for the characters to talk to each other and just talk, essentially, and give me time as well to process, because otherwise I was just a little bit confused the whole way through. So in the end, I only gave this one 3 stars as well. I do think I will continue this series, just not for the read along, because I'm just confused, quite frankly, and I just want a little bit of time to sort of process what's just happened and then maybe move on. I don't know. I just, generally, I just want to process it. Maybe you can help. If anybody's read the whole series, is there more world building? Please let me know down below. I would love to know if there's more world building in this, or if it just sort of speeds along again the whole way through the series. So if you do have any answers to any of the things I've just sort of mentioned, if it gets better or anything, please do let me know down below and help me decide whether or not I'm going to prioritise getting the second book or not. And then my final two things are mangas. The first one is The Promised Neverland Volume 2, and then the second one is My Hero Academia Volume 1. So starting with The Promised Neverland, this was the second one. I read the first one at the beginning of the month, if I remember rightly, and then I've gone on to the second one because I wanted to give it a second chance because the first one didn't quite grab me. This one definitely grabbed me a lot more. I did enjoy the characters more and the plotting and the planning stages of them trying to escape this compound and stuff like this. I did really enjoy the plot twist. I didn't see this plot twist coming in the middle of this comic, I will admit, and it did really hook me in. So I do think I'm going to continue on with this series, but at the moment I'm not going to prioritise it, but I will admit that I am going to put in a hold for the third one because I am now really interested in this manga. And then the final thing I read was My Hero Academia Volume 1. Now, I had a lot of high hopes for this one because obviously it was superheroes. I have a superhero thing. Obviously I have a superhero thing, and this one felt slightly generic to me, and I felt slightly not disappointed, but I think I hyped it up too much in my head, which is my problem. I hype these things up in my head and then they don't meet those expectations, but so that's entirely me. But it did feel slightly generic in the sense that it was like, oh, there's a school for superheroes. Nearly everyone's a superhero. The main character wants to go to the super school but has no powers. And it was just sort of like slightly generic in that way, but I am hoping for more as the series goes on, because obviously this was just a setup. Essentially this was just the start of it, so I can't really complain too much. I will say that the artwork again was a little bit confusing in this one, but I'm starting to think it may be Overdrive doing that to me, because quite frankly on Overdrive it gives me the 2-page spread and won't let me zoom in on individual panels like Comixology does. So in some panels it's really hard to read what's been written and really hard to actually see what's been drawn. So I can't really blame the manga for that or the artist or anything like that. It could just be Overdrive, so I'm going to have to see what happens when the library's properly open and I feel comfortable enough to actually borrow things from the library again, and at the moment I'll just blame Overdrive for that. But essentially though, it did feel slightly generic. The main character did feel quite naive and quite sort of annoying to me, but at the same time I can't again really blame him for that, because one, he's young, and two, it's not like I wouldn't act like that myself in the same situation. If I was in a world filled with superheroes, I'd be Gwenpool, who is essentially basically like the main character, otherwise known as a massive fan of all of them. I'd have encyclopedic knowledge, and I'd definitely be a screaming fangirl over all of these characters. I just know I would, so I can't really blame him for that either. And to be honest, he is living my superhero dream, so I can't really blame him for that, to be honest. So in the end it was a mixed thing. I do think it's a good start for a series. I do think the series has potential, but at the moment this one's only 3 stars, but I am going to continue on with this series and see where it goes. And that is absolutely everything I read in March. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please do give me a thumbs up. Comment down below with what you read in March. I'd love to know. I'll also leave a link down below to all of my social media if you want to check it out, including to the Comic Book Sanctum, which is my website dedicated to Marvel Comics. And if you want to see any more of my videos, please click subscribe here, and over here will be the link to my previous video. But until next time everyone, bye!